All right. Hi guys. So this is um, a project that I've been thinking about doing for a few years now. Um, and it is a project that is from a website called StoryCorps. And if you don't know anything about StoryCorps, um, this is their website. Their Their mission is to preserve and share humanity's stories in order to build connections between people and create a more just and compassionate world. And so basically, what they do is they have interview sites. They also encourage people to submit interviews themselves to their site. Uh, that it's people telling their stories. So they have this site is awesome. It has a ton of samples. I've used StoryCorps stories and their podcast before. I actually used it this year before we wrote our personal narrative, but I haven't taken the leap to actually have students do the StoryCorps interview process. And so StoryCorps has a ton of, like I said, they have a ton of different resources. We used American Pathways, which is an initiative of theirs to record, preserve, and share stories and experiences of refugees, asylees, immigrants, and Muslims living in the United States. Teaching where I teach, we have a high population of Somali refugees. So this was a really great piece to incorporate this year. We This year was my first year teaching it. We were trying to diversify our uh, the literature that we use in junior year. We teach American literature. Our our canon for the longest time was, old white male. Writers, and so we tried to diversify it, and we ended up picking up the book Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, which is by Jose Antonio Vargas, and it is his um, story about being um, an illegal immigrant in the United States. And so I've used it for the first time this year, and the students have been really receptive despite any political views, and we try to not look at the political side of it too much. We try to really focus on his story and this idea of um, how he tries to shape his identity coming to America. And so that's our first unit junior year that I've developed is this identity and perspective unit. And so some of the questions that we focus on: how do our personal journeys shape who we are? What is the danger of a single story? How do we empathize with others whose stories are different than our own? And so this project is actually having students engage in the StoryCorps process of developing interview questions and interviewing their peers in order to help them tell their own stories. And so got all the Common Core standards. The problem with this, and I've had a problem with this every year that I've done this, is that we don't actually have any narrative targets or standards that we as a um, school, like junior junior year, none of their writing targets have anything to do with narratives. So we do end up using the standard that I always attach to their personal narratives is their revision standard, because they will always go back and revise. Um, but these are just Common Core standards that would fit if we were to ever incorporate them into our junior year curriculum. Just kind of this unit overview. If I were to incorporate this into um, my current unit, I start my current unit off with the TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. And I think that I would this is something I would probably do pretty early on in the unit, possibly um, one of the first things that we do. I guess we should start reading. I would probably have them start reading Dear America, and possibly um, incorporate this somehow. But I just kind of took this as a separate unit as I went through. So looking at why do stories matter, and then focusing on why do our stories matter. So StoryCorps actually does this. Um, they have it's called the Great Thanks. I think it's the Great Thanksgiving, the Great Listen, or something. And it's students who interview usually elderly um, people in order to help preserve that history. And so there are some stories from there that I took to incorporate into this StoryCorps gallery walk, so that students can see what other students have written and submitted to this website. Because a lot of the stories that you usually come across on StoryCorps are adults. So I wanted them to be able to see some that were done by students. Um, then we'll move into this idea of how to tell our stories. So really kind of analyzing different StoryCorps videos, animations, interviews, and coming up with a master interview question list together. Um, and so there's some activities here. You can click on anything that's links itself to the activity that I put together. Uh, Telling your stories, refining your stories. So this is, partnering up, interviewing, giving time for them to kind of edit, revise. The idea is that they're going to take a 2 to 3 minute chunk. So their interviews should be relatively long, probably around 8 minutes. And they're going to pick a 2 to 3 minute segment to post to our course webpage, so that other students can listen and analyze and reflect on those interviews as well. Students will also have the option to submit the interviews that they do to StoryCorps. That is at the discretion of the person being interviewed. Think maybe I could assign extra credit for that if they wanted to do that, to kind of get their story out in the real world. Otherwise, it'll be up on our course webpage, and we'll probably invite other classes or maybe not parents, but probably other classes to listen in. And then the idea is that they're going to take these interviews that they created, and they're going to use it as seeds to writing their own longer personal narrative. And they also have the opportunity, this is where I give them the opportunity to also use it as a basis for their college essay, and so that they have a draft going into their senior year. And so really the final days here is kind of going over, okay, personal narratives, college essay prompts, figuring out, what you might want to write about, and then actually writing the personal narratives. Um, and those will go up onto the course website as well. And then down here, I've got the both of the assignment rubrics, one for the interview assignment and one for the personal narrative assignment that you guys can explore. But that is what I came up with. So enjoy, and maybe you'll find some inspiration to incorporate StoryCorps into your own class.